There's no better way to keep your lawn looking great and healthy and full of vitality than overseeding, and yet it's something that most people don't even know about. They focus on other things, but overseeding is really the key to a lawn that looks strong and vital all the time, and it can be very simple. In this video we're going to show you how easy it is and how important it is, so tune in. So we're here in early March and everything's about to happen in the world of gardening and landscaping, and all of that we'll cover. So subscribe to our channel and keep up with it all, and I'll try to inform you of all the interesting things that happen as spring develops. When I meet people, a lot of times for the first time, the conversation quickly goes to their lawn, because lawns are important to people, and lots of people have questions about keeping their lawn looking good. And so I've been thinking about lawns and looking at lawns. In fact, I once got in an accident because I was looking at a lawn instead of the road. So about 45 years now of focusing on lawns, and I'm going to share what I know about the importance of overseeding. So overseeding lawns is generally thought of as something you do when you have a warm season grass that turns brown in the winter and you want to keep it green. So in much of the country, that's how overseeding is understood. If you have something like a Bermuda lawn and you want it to look good in December and January, then you have to overseed in the fall. And then that comes up in the fall, stays green all year, and then in the spring, when your lawn greens up again, that tends to die off if you mow it at the right height. So that's traditionally what overseeding is thought of, but it's really more important than that. No matter what kind of lawn you have, I think overseeding should be a part of keeping it healthy and making it look its best. In a prior video called Clay Soil Lawn Care, we covered overseeding in terms of describing it and giving it its due importance, but what we didn't do is show you how to do it. In this video we're going to show you exactly how to do it, but that idea of overseeding for general health then can be done, as we explained in that video, in the fall or the spring. And it's done to pretty much refresh your lawn and make it look vital and make it look new. So you essentially mow down usually as low as you can get your existing lawn and try to get close to some kind of soil contact, and then overseed it. So this is an additional way to use overseeding, not just over warm season grass, but over any kind of grass, whether you have bluegrass or fescue or Bermuda or perennial rye. No matter what kind of lawn you have, I think overseeding probably at least once a year or once every other year is important, especially if you're one that likes your lawn to look as good as possible. There are some very simple ways to overseed that would hardly take you any time at all, and you would have no excuse not to do. The first thing would be to pick the right seed, which probably takes as much effort as anything. And I picked this lawn to film the video at because it shows an example of real typical problems that people become dissatisfied with their lawns about. This lawn is also typical in that it's a mix of a lot of different kinds of grasses. It started out being a cool season grass, and then if anything goes wrong during hot summer periods and that cool season grass dies out, like a fescue or a bluegrass or a perennial rye, then Bermuda tends to come in and get established, or some kind of warm season grass. In much of the western part of the United States, that's very common. And so you end up, in all parts of the United States, ended up with this unintended mix of grasses. And so in this case, we have one area that is under a fig tree, and because of the shade, it's died out, and so it's almost all dirt. And so we'll talk about how to seed that. And the type of seed would vary depending on if it's in the full sun or the shade. So in that shady area under the fig tree, we're going to seed with either tall fescue is one of the most shade tolerant plants, but I already tried that here and the tall fescue didn't make it, so I'm going to use a different approach. Another very shade tolerant grass that will work pretty well is Chewing's fescue or creeping red fescue. So I'm going to plant that under the fig tree, and then in this expanse of lawn that gets a lot of sun, you could use tall fescue, or I'm going to plant today perennial rye, which comes up fast. Now, when I talk about a simple way to do it, what you can do is just mow your lawn, just maybe a little lower than normal, and then grab your bucket of seed or a bag of seed and throw some seed around. It can be that unsophisticated, and then you'll have to water properly, which we'll talk about on the fourth step. But you can do something that simple as just throw it on by hand and hardly have any preparation and use no top dressing, and that's the simplest way. And frequently, if you do it at the right time and water properly and use the right fertilizer, it'll work better than you would imagine. So under this fig tree, the timing is important, and you can see this fig tree is just sprouting leaves, just beginning to sprout leaves here in early March. So before this, when it was completely dormant and we let in light, the temperatures were cool, and so seed wouldn't germinate very well. Now we're starting to get some warmer temperatures, and the leaves are starting to come out, so we want to seed it before all the leaves come out and give us dense shade, then it won't germinate as well. So this is a perfect time when these leaves still haven't developed and we get good light under this fig tree. We'll broadcast all our seed, and it'll come up real strong in this time of March. In California is an excellent time to germinate a lawn. In other parts of the country, any time in the spring is a good time. What you want is to be able to keep it moist but not allow it to dry out. So you need a little bit of heat to germinate the seed, but you don't want so much heat that the seed dries out. So spring is good, fall is good. So instead of just throwing this on out of a bucket, we're going to use more sophisticated methods. We're going to use our spreader like this. I happen to have a rather large spreader because a lot of times we do big jobs that applies the seed very precisely, so you don't get seed where you don't want it in the planting areas or anywhere where it doesn't belong. So this is a very professional type of seed spreader. Obviously you can get them just like this in smaller sizes. It's called a drop spreader because it drops the seed exactly where in the size of the spreader. The other thing that makes a big difference, where we can almost absolutely guarantee maximization of germination of seed, is if we use a top dressing mulch. Today I'm using Amend, which is widely available at almost every Home Depot and Lowe's. Very easy to find Amend. Doesn't have to be Amend, any kind of organic amendment. And we put it on very thin, like 1/8 of an inch, to slightly cover that seed. We can throw it on by hand and rake it, or we can use a spreader specifically for that purpose, which does a real nice job of spreading it at a thin layer. But this layer of Amend or whatever you use, compost would be good, any kind of organic matter, keeps the seed moist so you don't have to battle with watering all throughout the day, and it creates a little bit of heat. And by creating heat, especially if we're trying to seed early in the season, then that seed is going to germinate much faster. So the top dressing, you will see a big difference, but again, it's not as easy. It's a lot more work to use a top dressing. I used it under the fig tree where we have less heat, less light, so I'll create a little bit of heat and warmth. I think it's important because that's a little harder area to germinate seed. The other thing is we'll treat it like an experiment. We'll look at how the parts with top dressing germinate compared to the parts without. And we've got probably 2/3 of it without and 1/3 of it with, and we'll show you in a future video what kind of difference that made. Then The other thing we're going to do in addition to spreading the seed is we're going to put some really good quality organic amendments over the top of the seed, and our blend and our penetrate both impact the rate of germination. It'll make it germinate faster, and it will make more of the seeds, so a higher percentage of seeds germinate. If your lawn is in pretty good shape and you have no pest disease issues and you have no drainage problems, you're mainly just trying to improve the lawn and do some level of soil improvement, then you can just use nourish-biosol, which would be the least expensive way to and product to put right over the top of the seed, and that will feed the soil and feed those newly emerging lawn seeds. If you think you have any kinds of other issues with the soil, like you get fungus or you get any kind of pest and disease, or you have drainage problems, then I'd use the blend, which is a mix of optimized, nourish-biosol, and maximized, because that is more of a full-scale soil treatment. So that's kind of the highest level of sophistication. We went from throwing it on by hand and watering it to throwing it on or applying it precisely with a seed spreader, putting products on to increase rate and amount of germination of the seed, and then using a top dressing mulch with either by hand or with a screen spreader. Let us know what your biggest challenge is with your lawn, why you're thrilled with it or not so happy with it. A lot of people want their lawns to be greener than the Joneses. If that's your goal, are you meeting with success? I could make sure, give you a precise way of making sure that happens, but we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments regarding all your challenges about lawn, and we'll help you solve them. All these steps are important, but the most important one is you have to keep the seed moist when the sun's out, when it's warm, because that's when the seed will germinate. And so let's say you just do everything right and you use the most sophisticated means of applying the seed and using a top dressing, and you don't water it, it doesn't get any water, it won't germinate. So the better you water it, the faster it will come up, and the more seeds will sprout, and the more dense the stand of grass will be. And so what you want to be thinking about is we want it to be moist when the sun's shining on it, because that combination of sunlight and moisture makes it germinate. So how do you do that? If you have a controller, an irrigation controller, you could set it, but you don't want to water, you hear a lot about watering deeply. Well, that's for a different time and place. In this time and place, we want to water very briefly and shallow, because all we want to do is keep that seed moist. So we want to keep the top of the ground moist when the sun's out. So as you might imagine, the best way to do that is with short bursts of water all throughout the day. So you could set your, now some people don't want to do this because it might be against their municipal codes, but if we're just talking about horticultural optimization, the best way would be to set that controller to come on at, say, 9 a.m. the first time for just a minute or two, and then again about 11 in the morning, and then again about 1 in the afternoon, and then again about 3 in the afternoon, maybe one more time at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And by doing that, when the sun's out, we keep that moist, that top very moist. We're not watering deeply. We just want the seed to be moist, and it's going to germinate like crazy, quickly and thoroughly. Lots of seeds are going to sprout up, probably with the seed I'm using, probably in 7 to 12 days I'll get germination. So on this video I emphasize that watering is the most important part. Well, what I neglected to say is right up there with it at the top is the health of your soil, and that's what our whole line is all about, making sure your soil is as healthy as it can be without having to spend a lot of money and time on it. So very simple topical applications. Go to our website to learn about them at johnandbobs.com. One of my really big pet peeves is when people start talking to me and telling me about how they just applied weed and feed. Well, we did a video on that. The title of the video was "Don't Use Weed and Feed." So tune in and watch why that's a pet peeve of mine. It really riles me up. Don't use it.